Most people want to change their finances in 3 weeks. Some say Dick and Maximo sis meses y mi vida tiene que ser otra. I'm going to be brutally honest with you from the start. If you're earning close to minimum wage, the real transformation isn't a 3-month challenge. It's a 3-year war. 3 years of saying no when everyone around you says yes. 3 years of sacrifice that nobody sees while they post stories from restaurants and you're eating at home. 3 years of uncomfortable decisions, of feeling like the strange one in the group. But when those 3 years pass, you get something most people never touch in their entire life. Stability, peace of mind, real options, freedom. Today, I'm going to walk you through the exact plan I used to go from earning about $1,200 a month, drowning in debt and stress, to having real savings, investments that grow on their own, and zero financial anxiety. Step by step, no filters, no romantic story. It was hard. It was lonely, but it worked. And if I could do it on almost minimum wage, you can too. A few years ago, I worked in a call center. 8 hours a day on the phone, the same script, the same chair, the same fluorescent lights. I brought home around $1,200 a month, and that money evaporated before I even had time to blink. Rent, $500. Utilities, $120. Food, about $280. Transportation, $100. I was already at $1,000 before thinking about clothes, going out, or any emergency. The remaining $200 never made it to the end of the month. So I did what everyone around me did. I grabbed the credit card. It's only $30 a month. What's the problem? 6 months later, I owed $2,500 on cards. After a year, I was at $4,000 between credit cards and a personal loan I had taken to pay off the cards. Genius. The worst part wasn't the amount. It was the feeling that there was no way out. Every month I paid the minimums, ended with nothing, used the cards again to survive, and sank a little deeper. It felt like financial quicksand. The more I moved, the faster I went down. One night I'd had enough. I was tired of checking my balance and feeling that knot in my stomach. I made myself a coffee, sat down with a notebook, and decided to do something I had avoided for years: look reality in the eye. I wrote down my exact income. I listed every debt with balance and interest rate. I wrote every fixed expense and every average variable expense. When I added everything, the number hit me like a punch. I was spending about $150 more than I earned every single month. I wasn't unlucky. I wasn't cursed. I was simply living in denial. That was the first step of the plan, a brutal diagnosis. No more, I think I spend around... No, exact numbers. Because you cannot fix what you refuse to measure. Once I saw the whole minus $150 every month, I realized I only had 2 options: earn more or spend less. Earning more was a long-term move. Spending less, I could start that same night. So I went line by line on my expenses and started cutting with a knife. Delivery? Gone, 0. Eating out? Gone. No bars, no restaurants, no movie nights. Streaming services? Canceled. Goodbye Netflix. Goodbye premium music. Gym membership? Canceled. I started training at home and in the park. Clothes? Frozen. I would wear what I had until it literally fell apart. Coffee outside? Only from my own kitchen in a thermos. Uber? Only in emergencies. The rule was, if it doesn't keep me alive or help me work, it's not essential. With those cuts, I reduced my variable spending from around $350 down to about $100. That flipped my cash flow from a $150 deficit to a $100 surplus. For the first time in years, I had money left at the end of the month. Here's where most people make their first mistake. They immediately throw that little surplus at their debt. Sounds logical, but it's a trap. Because the first unexpected bill pushes them back into the credit card, and the cycle repeats. I didn't want that. So during the first 4 months, every single one of those $100 went into a tiny emergency fund. 4 months later, I had $400 sitting in a separate savings account. It wasn't much. It didn't make me feel rich. But it gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. A little room to breathe. When the inevitable small emergencies came, a doctor visit, a bus pass, something breaking, I could pay in cash instead of swiping the card. That cushion was my oxygen mask, I'm not going to lie to you. Those first months were some of the ugliest of my life. No delivery, no outings, no subscriptions, no little treats. Friends invited me places, and I had to invent excuses. I walked past promotions for clothes and had to look away. Friday nights felt strange while everyone else posted stories and I was reheating rice and beans. But every time I wanted to quit, I remembered how it felt to go to sleep worried about my debt. How helpless I felt when I had to use the card just to buy groceries. Pain with a purpose is easier to carry than pain without meaning. So I kept going. Once I had the mini emergency fund, it was time to attack the real monster, debt. There are two classic methods, snowball and avalanche. Snowball says you pay off the smallest debt first to get quick wins. Avalanche says you pay off the highest interest first to save more money long term. I chose a modified avalanche. I listed my debts by interest rate. Card 1 at 24%, Card 2 at 18%, and the personal loan at 12%. I decided I will pay the minimum on all of them, but every extra dollar will go to the one that is charging me the most interest. At the time, Card 1 alone was eating around $50 per month in interest. That's $600 a year thrown into the bank's pocket. With my new $100 surplus plus the minimum payment, I was sending about $170 every month just to that card. It took 9 months of consistency, but eventually the balance hit zero. That feeling, seeing that line disappear, was addictive. It was proof that the plan was working. When Card 1 died, I didn't celebrate by spending more. I took the entire $170 and added it on top of what I was already paying to Card 2. Now Card 2 was getting around $200 per month. 6 months later, that card was gone too. 2 debts down, 1 to go. Around that time, I also made one of the best moves of my life. I found a roommate. My rent went from $500 to $250. Those extra $250 went straight to the remaining loan. Between what I was already paying and the new margin, I could throw about $450 per month at that last debt. 3 months later, the final payment went through. In total, it took about 18 months to erase roughly $4,000 of debt. The day I checked my accounts and saw $0 owed, I sat on my couch and cried. For the first time in 4 years, I didn't owe money to anyone. And those $450 that had been chained to debt were finally mine to build a future. The next phase of the plan was building a real emergency fund, what I call the sacred 6-month buffer. I calculated my bare-bones monthly needs: rent, basic food, utilities, transportation. No luxuries, no entertainment, no extras. It came to around $1,000 per month. 6 months of that meant $6,000. It sounded huge to a guy who had started at $1,200 a month. But I gave myself a realistic time frame, 18 months. That meant I needed to save about $333 per month. With no debt and my life still extremely optimized, it was possible. My income was still around $1,200. My total expenses, thanks to the roommate and the frugal lifestyle, were about $750. That left me with $450. Every month, $350 went straight to the emergency fund, and I kept $100 for small flex insanity. I set up an automatic transfer on payday so I wouldn't even see the money. Month 1, $350. Month 2, $700. Month 3, $1,050. I watched the number grow slowly like a plant. In month 17, I crossed $6,000, 1 month ahead of schedule. Something shifted in my brain when I saw that amount sitting in a separate account. For the first time in my adult life, I knew that if I lost my job tomorrow, I wouldn't be homeless next month. I had 6 months to breathe, think, and find another path. That feeling changed everything. I started sleeping deeply. I stopped saying yes to everything at work out of fear. I began negotiating, setting boundaries, and looking for better opportunities, not from panic, but from strength. That's why I tell you, this isn't just about numbers. It's about the person you become when you know you're protected. With debt gone and the emergency fund built, I still had a problem. I didn't really know what to do with any extra money. I had around $100 left after contributing to the fund, and I was tempted to let it sit in the account or to loosen up my spending. Instead, I made what turned out to be one of the best investments of my life. I invested in my financial education. I bought a few books classics about money, assets, and investing, and I forced myself to read 30 minutes every morning before work with a notebook in hand. Those pages explained things nobody had ever taught me. That the rich make money work for them. That the goal is to build assets, not collect toys. That time in the market matters more than timing the market. My brain exploded. Suddenly, I saw opportunities where before I only saw impossibilities. I realized my situation wasn't a life sentence. It was a starting point. That new mindset led directly to the next step, investing. I understood that keeping all my money in a savings account was like running on a treadmill, lots of effort, no real movement because of inflation. I researched, watched videos, read more, and came to a simple conclusion. For someone like me with no desire to pick individual stocks, a low-cost index fund tracking something like the S&P 500 was the smartest move. Historically, over the long term, it grows around 8 to 10% per year. So I opened an investment account and started putting in $200 every month no matter what. I didn't try to guess the market. If it was up, I bought. If it was down, I bought. My job wasn't to be a fortune teller. My job was to be consistent. After 2 years of doing this almost automatically, I checked the account. I had contributed around $4,800 and the balance was roughly $6,200, about $1,400 of pure growth, without doing anything but showing up every month. That was the moment when compound interest stopped being a concept and became something real in my life. But there was still a ceiling, my salary. I was doing everything right, budgeting hard, saving, investing, but I was still on basically the same income. There's a limit to how far you can go cutting expenses. At some point, you have to earn more. Not by adding a second exhausting job that burns all your time, but by increasing your value. So I decided to invest money and energy into learning a high-value skill. I chose data analysis. I spent about $600 on an online program. For 6 months, I studied 3 hours a day after work, plus most weekends. It was brutal. I was tired, tempted to quit, but I kept reminding myself why I started. When I finished, I built a small portfolio of projects and started applying for junior analyst positions. A few months later, I landed a job paying around $2,000 a month, almost double what I had been making in the call center. That single decision, using money to buy a skill instead of a gadget, accelerated my entire journey. With more income came a new danger: lifestyle creep. The temptation to upgrade everything just because I could. To avoid falling into that extremely common trap, I created what I call the total automation system. I opened 3 accounts and set fixed percentages. Account 1, everyday life, 60% of my income, about $1,200 for rent, food, utilities, transport, everything I needed to live. Account 2, future, 30%, about $600, half for investments, half to keep strengthening my emergency fund and other long-term goals. Account 3, freedom, 10%, about $200 I could spend however I wanted without guilt. On payday, the money was split automatically. No debates. No, I'll transfer later. The system protected me from myself. I could enjoy life a bit more, while still building wealth aggressively in the background. Of course, the story isn't perfect. Around month 9 of this 3-year journey, I almost derailed everything. An unexpected expense hit. My work laptop died and the repair cost around $800. My emergency fund wasn't fully built yet. I had about $3,000 saved. For a moment, my brain panicked. All this sacrifice for nothing. Now I have to go back into debt. I was seconds away from reaching for the credit card. But I stopped, took a breath, and reminded myself, this is exactly why the fund exists. I used $800 from my savings, fixed the laptop, and made a new rule with myself: I would refill that emergency fund as fast as I could. For the next 2 months, I doubled my contributions until the balance was back where it should be. That was a huge lesson. Setbacks are not a sign that the plan failed. They're part of the plan. The fund is not a museum piece you never touch. It's a safety net you use when you truly need it, and then you rebuild. After a while, with investments growing and the foundation solid, I took one more step: diversification. I didn't do this at the beginning. I waited until I had several $1,000s invested in index funds. Then I added some bonds for stability and a small portion in real estate. Vehicles to have exposure to property without buying a house. The exact mix isn't the important part. What matters is the principle. Once your base is strong, you stop chasing crazy returns and start building a balanced, resilient portfolio that can handle ups and downs. There's one more layer. People almost never talk about the psychological maintenance. This path is not just about math. It's about emotions. There were days when I wanted to throw everything away, buy something big and feel normal again. Days when I watched friends spending freely and thought maybe I'm overdoing it. Maybe this isn't worth it. To survive those moments, I created small rituals. I celebrated milestones, each debt I killed, each thousand saved, each new investment level. I allowed controlled rewards so the journey wouldn't feel like torture. Once a week, I spent a few minutes visualizing my future life, no debt, strong savings, work I actually liked, freedom to say no. I also connected with communities online where other people were on the same path. Seeing their progress, their struggles, and their wins kept me motivated. Without that mental support, I'm not sure I would have finished the 3 years. Eventually, things came full circle. After following this plan for 3 years, my situation was unrecognizable compared to where I started. 12,000 in a solid emergency fund. Thousands invested in growing, a better job, a calmer mind, and a simple system that kept everything running almost on autopilot. That was the moment I decided to share the plan with others, to record videos like this one, and to be the person I wish I had found when I was drowning in debt with a call center headset on. Teaching closed the loop. Explaining the steps to other people made my own discipline even stronger. Now you know the real timeline. Not 3 weeks. Not 6 months. Around 3 years. 3 years of diagnosis without lies. Savage budget cuts, small emergency cushions. Systematic debt payoff, building a sacred 6-month fund. Learning about money, investing for the long term. Increasing your income by increasing your value. Automating your system, protecting yourself from relapse, diversifying, and taking care of your mind. Is it easy? No. Is it worth it? Every second. Because the trade is simple. A few years of discomfort in exchange for decades of stability. So the question for you is not, can this work? You just saw that it can. The real question is, in which step of this plan are you going to start today? Are you finally going to sit down and face your numbers? Are you going to cut the expenses you know are killing you? Are you going to build that first tiny buffer, or open your first investment account, or learn a skill that makes you more valuable? Commit in your own head, and then write it down somewhere you'll see every day. And if you want to go even deeper into this mindset, there's a video you absolutely need to watch next. In this one, we talked about the long-term plan, the 3-year path from minimum wage to stability. But in the previous video, I showed you something even more raw. What a millionaire would actually do if he suddenly had to live on minimum wage. If you want to see that mentality in action, how a rich mindset behaves with a tiny paycheck, go watch the previous video. If a millionaire earned minimum wage, he'd do this. Watch it right after this one and connect the dots between mentality and strategy, so you can start building your own plan today.